This will sound very strange, but the capsize of the massive cargo ship named Golden Ray off the coast of Georgia in September of 2019 is a massive prophetic sign from God that is symbolism for the halting of international trade and the collapse, the capsizing of financial markets, as this capsized ship capsized off the shore of Jekyll Island, the location where the Federal Reserve banking system was created. And this prophetic sign, this capsized cargo ship, along with a prophetic fire on St. Simons Island, which is right next to Jekyll Island, on April 15th, 2023, on the same day that the smoke bomb was thrown at the Prime Minister in Japan, a country that symbolizes nuclear bombs, and the Manhattan Project, as well as many other prophetic signs, including the massive cargo ship that got stuck on the Suez Canal in 2021, and the Boston bombing, and the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance ship, on the same day that Joe Biden issued an executive order for the Federal Reserve to create digital currency, and many, many other amazing things are prophecies that are revealing and predicting that the financial markets will make a secondary peak. Not an all-time peak, but a peak from their lows that were made in October of 2022, on specifically July 3rd, 2023. And then after making this peak on July 3rd, the stock market will begin its biggest crash and collapse in all of history. The post date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and this forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. The prophetic signs that will be explained in this video are also simultaneously pointing to the date that it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan and there will be a large-scale evacuation of Manhattan Island on September 25th, 2023. It is also likely that the official narrative in the mainstream media that will emerge regarding this event will somehow be a lie. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, this truly amazing, profound, must-watch video was produced before May 4th and May 8th, 2023. And this video will explain the trail of signs that was leading to these dates regarding the predicted peak of the stock market and the beginning of the crash, and also the predicted date of the dirty bomb in Manhattan. Prior to May 4th and May 8th, these two predictions were predicted to occur on these two dates, because God was overwhelmingly pointing to those dates with his trails of signs. And this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. God will point to a date in a trail of signs, and often it is not really possible to know whether that's the end of the trail or just another step in the trail. But as you will see, as I will explain, the prophetic signs that occurred on these two dates were extremely relevant and therefore confirmed 100% the analysis that was given prior to those dates. And if you are skeptical of that, well, the prediction will prove it. In other words, when the stock market peaks as predicted on July 3rd, it will prove 100% all of the analysis in this video that was pointing to, for example, the stock market on May 8th. Likewise, the prediction for the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan, when this happens on September 25th as predicted, it will 100% be proof of the analysis that God was pointing to May 4th, as will be explained in the rest of this video. But prior to getting started here, I just want to update on the information. And so I'm just going to read quickly this paragraph that I wrote regarding the stock market and what happened on May 8th. This is, in other words, an update, and then the rest of this video will be focused on God pointing to May 8th. And again, May 8th is a step, a very important step. If you want to understand God, if you want to understand his big picture of signs, his prophetic signs, it is important, it is crucial that you understand how it works and what happened on May 8th. And so let's begin with this paragraph here. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. In order to identify the Antichrist, the 44th president, who became the president in 2009 and will become the president again in 2023, and who is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. The stock market is predicted to peak and then begin its crash on July 3rd, 2023, which will be exactly 4 plus 4 weeks after May 8th, 2023. 4 plus 4 weeks hints at the number 44. And God uses the number 44 again to point to the Antichrist, the 44th president. Okay, so China is the red dragon. And in Bible prophecy, it is the red dragon that symbolizes the Antichrist and is thrown down from heaven to earth. On May 8th, 2023, the date that was predicted ahead of time regarding the stock market, as I will demonstrate, on this date, it was reported that China's mysterious spacecraft had descended from the second heaven, space, and landed on Earth, which was a parallel with Revelation chapter 12 and the red dragon being thrown down from heaven to earth. China, the red dragon's mysterious spacecraft, and that's how the news media reported it, it being mysterious, it landed on Earth after spending 276 days in space, which is uncanny because this number of 276 is the 23rd triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 23rd row is 276. It is one of 3 unusually specific numbers in the Bible, and coincidentally, all 3 of them are triangular numbers. And in the Bible, it was 276 souls that were shipwrecked in the book of Acts. And a spaceship is symbolic of a ship. 276 hints at 23, and 9 days after the spaceship, China's spaceship was in space for 276 days, was the day that the new images of the Titanic ship were released in a format that provided a never-seen-before 3D perspective. 9 days and 276 days is a pairing of 9 and 23, as 276 is the 23rd triangular number. And again, God pairs the numbers to confirm the signs and connections, and this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would, if you think about it, would provide a second or third witness would be through pairing certain numbers together. And for example, 9 and 23. So the Titanic sank on its maiden voyage, and it was billed as unsinkable, which made this a prophetic sign from God. It symbolized man's hubris. It is a hint at Genesis chapter 11 with the Tower of Babel and man attempting to conquer nature and be like God without God. So anyway, the Titanic sank on its maiden voyage, and the Titanic was on its way to Manhattan Island in New York City. 9 days before the new images were released, a scientific study, which was May 8th, by the way, 9 days before, a scientific study was published that demonstrated that Manhattan Island in New York is slowly sinking. This published report of the sinking of Manhattan Island was a prophetic sign, That occurred exactly 4 plus 4 weeks before it is predicted that the indexes on the New York Stock Exchange in Lower Manhattan will peak and begin sinking in a crash. That's what it hinted at. The sinking of Manhattan was a prophetic sign that is confirming symbolism for the sinking of the stock market exactly 4 plus 4 weeks later. So this date of May 8th, the day of the China's Red Dragon ship, and the day of the report was 9 days before the published new images of the Titanic, and the day of the report and the landing of the mysterious Red Dragon China ship, which was in space for 276 days, which hints at the number 23, is 4 plus 4 weeks before it is predicted that the stock market will peak and begin its crash on July 3rd. And so again, that 4 plus 4 weeks pairs with the 23, which is in the China spaceship, and it pairs with the 9 days, because from May 8th, it is 9 days to the report, to the new images of the Titanic from the report of Manhattan sinking. And then from the report of Manhattan sinking, it is 4 plus 4 days, which hints at 44, to the day that the stock market will peak and begin sinking. So that 9 days and 4 plus 4 weeks from, and by the way, I think I misspoke there. It's 4 plus 4 weeks. So 9 days from May 8th and also 4 plus 4 weeks from May 8th gives us a pairing of 9 and 44. And that 9 and 44 both pair with the 276 days, because 276 hints at 23. And that also was on May 8th. So we have the number on May 8th that pairs with the two connections from May 8th, one of 9 days and one of 4 plus 4 weeks. God pairs 23 and 44. May 8th, 2023 is exactly 4 plus 4 weeks before the predicted peak of the stock market on July 3rd, and 4 plus 4 weeks hints at the number 44. Exactly 44 months before May 8th. Okay, so we have an exact 4 plus 4 weeks connection from after May 8th. And now we're talking about a 44 months, exact months before May 8th, 2023. And by the way, May 8th in itself hints at 5 times 8 equals 40. And 8 divided by 5, or 5 divided by 8 is 1.6, which hints at 16, which hints at 4 times 4, which hints at 44. Okay, so anyway, exactly 44 months before May 8th was the day that the Golden Ray cargo ship with 4,000 vehicles capsized off the coast of the 4th state to join the Union, Georgia. 4,000 vehicles and the 4th state hints at 44. And this pairs with the exact 44 months connection to May 8th, which in turn connects with 4 plus 4 weeks to July 3rd. And so that's a connection of 44 and 44. 44 months followed by 4 plus 4 weeks. All 23 people that were on board the Golden Ray cargo ship were safely rescued. However, 4 of them were trapped inside the ship overnight on the 4th deck. At the time of the capsize, 1 person of the 4 was on the 2nd deck and another person of the 4 was on the 3rd deck. And so the 2nd and 3rd deck is another hint at 23. And the 4th deck and of 4 people is a hint at 44, which is another pairing of 23 and 44 that confirms the signs and connections. In other words, the dramatic rescue that captivated the world when they had to drill and open the side of the ship to get the trapped people out of it was a pairing of 23 and 44. The cargo ship represented international trade and commerce and is symbolic of the stock market. The ship capsized next to Jekyll Island, where the Federal Reserve banking system was created. This hints at the collapse of the financial system, along with the collapse of the stock market and economic trade. And that date that this happened was September 8th, 2019. And at that time, I knew intuitively that eventually that date would directly connect. Well, it's actually two connections, so it's a little indirect. But I knew that that date would connect profoundly to the day that the stock market would peak. And so this is what is being predicted as we speak, and it is profound how it connects with these pairings of 44 and 23, and the connection of exactly 44 months followed by exactly 4 plus 4 weeks. All right, so I'm just going to read from this email that I wrote to friends to explain this most amazing prophetic sign here. The capsized Golden Ray cargo ship off the coast of Jekyll Island is the central sign, if you will, but there are many, many other amazing signs that connect to this, as I will explain. I have attached the first of 3 diagrams to this email. I will explain things more fully in the video, which I am now doing now. You might want to look at the diagram while you read this. On April 15th, there was a toxic fire at a plastics plant. Residents within a half-mile radius were told to evacuate. Residents within a mile were told to shelter in place. The location was St. Simons Island on the coast of Georgia. This evacuation on the island hints at the predicted evacuation of Manhattan Island due to toxic radiation. This is one of a number of many signs now that God is using these explosions and toxic fires and evacuations to hint at, in his big picture of signs, the predicted event, which is the dirty bomb that is predicted to explode on Manhattan Island on May 4th, and there will be a mass evacuation. So this plastics plant fire on St. Simons Island on the coast of Georgia is one of these signs here. It occurred on April 15th. St. Simons Island is next to Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island is where the Federal Reserve banking system was created. On September 8th, 2019, the Golden Ray cargo ship capsized in between St. Simons Island and Jekyll Island. I have always known that the capsize of this ship was for symbolizing the capsize of the financial markets. I have always known that this date that this ship capsized would somehow connect to the crash of the financial markets. For a long time, this sign has been put on the shelf waiting to be employed. Its time has now come. This St. Simons Island fire was exactly 188 weeks after the Golden Ray cargo ship capsized. H188 is whoa exclamation mark. All right, so to explain here. First, God uses the number 188 frequently in his prophetic signs. In the Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, H188 is the word for whoa exclamation mark, which is a word used in context of extreme judgment in the Bible. Also, 188 hints at 9/11 because 17 divided by 9 equals 1.888 into infinity. This is prophetic for a number of reasons, but one of them being is that it hints at 9/11 because the second plane, which had a crew of 9 people, hit the second tower 17 minutes after the first plane. But 17 and 9 also hint at the end of the age because, for one thing, 17 times 9 is 153, and in Jesus' last miracle, which was symbolism for the end of the age, the 153 fish caught in the net was symbolism for the harvest of souls at the end of the age of fishing for men. And so that's why 188. Also, 9/11 was exactly 188 years after the only other time a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital, when the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate on 9/11 in 1813, and then proceeded to burn down the White House and the Capitol building before being chased out of Washington, D.C. by a hurricane. It is stunning that exactly 188 weeks we have this prophetic fire, this toxic fire on St. Simon's Island, exactly 188 weeks after the cargo ship capsized just off the coast near St. Simon's Island in between Jekyll Island. And Jekyll Island is the location of the creation of the Federal Reserve. It's a historic place for this reason. And as I'm saying, this cargo ship, which represented trade and commerce, this capsize of this massive cargo ship with its, I think I'll explain in a minute probably, but I think over 4,000 cars on it that were being traded all over the world, not just between South Korea and the US. There were other stops for this ship. Anyway, it represented international trade, which will come to a halt when the financial markets collapse because of the Federal Reserve System. So let's continue. The address of the plastics plant is 2801 2801 Cook Street. Cook may hint at fire, but 2801 definitely hints at 11. 2 plus 8 plus 1. 11 is the 9/11 number. On 9/11, it was Flight 11 with a crew of 11 people that slammed into the Twin Towers that looked like a giant 11 in New York State, the 11th state to join the Union. In the city, New York City, which has 11 letters, because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which in ancient Israel referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness, and in English is an idiom that means last chance. Time is running out, as in last chance for the nation to repent and turn back to God before judgment destruction, which is what the 9/11 judgment warning was. This is why also in the Bible, the number 11 is symbolism for the execution of God's judgment, including Genesis chapter 11, which regards the Tower of Babel, which is the story of the world coming together, hence the World Trade Center and this association with the number 11, as I just explained. Also, 188, as I just explained, is a 9/11 number. And as I just explained, the second plane with a crew of 9 people hit the second tower 17 minutes after the first one hit the tower. 17 divided by 9 equals 1.888 into infinity. 9/11 was also exactly 188 years after the only other time that a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital, when the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate on 9/11 in 1813, before they then burned down the White House and the Capitol building before being chased out of Washington, D.C. by a hurricane on the same day. 19 is also a 9/11 number, as the events of 9/11 pointed to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 10 through 11. The fire and evacuation from St. Simon's Island is 19 days before the predicted dirty bomb explosion and evacuation from Manhattan Island on May 4th. All right, now I need to interject here because, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video was produced before May 4th, and this prediction that this would be the day of the dirty bomb explosion, and we did receive the relevant clear signs that indicated that the analysis was correct, but it was a step in the trail of signs. So much happened on this date. This is what I call a super date. This is extremely important, and I won't get into explaining everything here, not even a fraction of it. And this will be explained in other videos. But one thing that did happen, among many other prophetic signs, is that the 12th state, North Carolina, passed a bill restricting abortion to 12 weeks. And that hinted at 12 times 12, which is 144, a very prophetic number in Bible prophecy. And also 144 is 9 times 16. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment, and God uses 16 as a hint at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. And so 9 times 16 hints at judgment from the Antichrist, the 44th president. But anyway, so it was the 12th state that passed the restriction on abortions for 12 weeks, which hinted at 12 times 12. And that points to September 25th, the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. There will be an evacuation of Manhattan Island. There's obviously much more confirmation than that. That's how God's signs works. As I mentioned earlier, it works on the principle of second and third witnesses. And so there's many, many, many witnesses to confirm that this is the date. But that's how we get there from May 4th and through this trail of signs that I am explaining right here. Furthermore, also on May 4th was the day that the leader of the 44-year-old, so at the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war, the leader, the idol for the blue team, and I say idol as in false idol, which is the biggest, the thing that God detests the most in the Bible. The God of Israel detests the worship of false idols. Anyway, the false idol for the blue team, Vladimir Zelensky, just before the beginning of that war, he turned 44 years old, and then there was an evacuation, an exodus from his country that was, at the time, made up of 44 million people. And this is because God is using Zelensky as symbolism for the Antichrist, the 44th president. Well, anyway, on this day, May 4th, he made a surprise visit. In other words, it wasn't possible to know ahead of time. It was a surprise visit to the International Criminal Court. And anyway, the material for the dirty bomb will come out of Ukraine. That's the reason for, in this context, why the 44-year-old of 44 million people visited the International Criminal Court on the state. But there's much more reason for that. It also connects to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran and then nuke Damascus, Syria. And it is predicted that that date will be August 26th. But anyway, I want to move on. Also on this May 4th date, it was reported that the unemployment rate was its lowest in 54 years. And the reason for, and what wasn't known, I don't think at the time of making this video, for the signs on the May 4th, and there's so much to explain, but it's explained in other videos, but it's all pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was the first black infantry regiment in the Civil War. And they, after training, were first stationed on St. Simons Island, which is amazing confirmation of what we're talking about here in this video, and this connection to this fire from St. Simons Island. Furthermore, this date, May 4th, which wasn't known ahead of time, although it could have been, this was the day of the National Day of Prayer, which was initiated by Abraham Lincoln, the leader during the Civil War. And then one of the signs we received on that date was, in a period of 5 days, 4 horses had died at the Kentucky Derby, which is right near where Abraham Lincoln was born. And Kentucky symbolizes the Civil War because, as Abraham Lincoln said, and I'm paraphrasing, it would be nice if God would be on our side, but I must have Kentucky. And there are other quotes like that. And Kentucky did because it was neutral at the beginning, and it was critical to the outcome of the war. So thought Lincoln anyway, and it does symbolize the Civil War for this reason in itself. But anyway, well, anyway, I will explain it in other videos. But the point is that that the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is known, the story of it is known for how they were not paid the equivalent amount that the northern white soldiers were paid, which was $13. And they were also charged for their uniforms, unlike the white soldiers. This was official policy from Washington. It symbolizes oppressive minority laws. which hints at the mark of the Antichrist and the persecution of the blue team of their arch enemy, true conservative Christians. Because although they don't know it, most of them, they are working for Satan. But that's what the Civil War is. It's in fact a religious war. There's no such thing as any person that doesn't have a religion. Everyone has a religion. Everyone has a worldview and a set of moral beliefs that guide them throughout their day-to-day life. And furthermore, it's a big part of who they are. And that's what we're in. We're in a religious war. But the point is that the mark of the Antichrist, which is the snake bite, will be enforced through programmable digital currency, which will be created after the stock market will crash, which will be created by the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve was created on Jekyll Island, which is right next to St. Simons Island. And in between these two islands is where this cargo ship capsized. And so this is how it all connects. The signs, in other words, on May 4th, which pointed to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was first stationed on St. Simons Island, is all about this connection to the collapse of the financial system, which is what this video is about. It's absolutely amazing. Make sure you watch all of the videos on this channel, including the ones that will be related to what happened on May 4th. Okay, so another parallel, by the way, there, if you didn't pick it up, is that they are both islands. St. Simons Island is a parallel with Manhattan Island. And so and the date 5-4 hints at the number 9, because 5-4 hints at 54, which is a multiple of 9, and 5 plus 4 equals 9. And so the fire on 2801 Cook Street, which hints at 11, connects with 19 days, which is symbolism for 9/11, to the date 5-4, which hints at the number 9, which makes this a pairing of 9 and 11, right? The Cook Street, 2801 Cook Street, 11, the date it connects to, 5-4, hints at 9, which makes this a pairing of 9 and 11, which confirms the signs and connections, which is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would provide a second or third witness to confirm the signs and connections is through pairing certain numbers together. For example, 9 and 11, which he does frequently. And the fire on St. Simons connects with 188 weeks, which is also 9/11 symbolism. The fire at 2801 Cook Street on April 15th, which hints at the number 11. And by the way, the date 415 hints at 11. I didn't know this until I just read it, because 15 minus 4 is 11. So the fire at 2801 Cook Street, the address 2801 hints at 11, and this was on the date 415, which also hints at 11. And also the date 415 hints at 15 plus 4 equals 19. And so this date in itself confirms the connection here from the street address that hints at the number 11 with 15 minus 4 equals 11, and the 19 days connection forward from the 11 with 15 plus 4 equals 19. And this date, 415, was 1 year and 11 months and 1 day after the remains of the Golden Ray cargo ship that were being salvaged from the bay caught on fire on May 14th, 2021. Okay, so we have this toxic fire and evacuation on April 15th, 4/15 in 2023, and this is again all about the number 11, and this date is or was 1 year, 11 months, and 1 day after the remains of the Golden Ray cargo ship caught on fire as it was being salvaged from the bay. And that date was May 14th, 2021. And May 14th, 2021 was the 73rd anniversary of the rebirth of Israel, and 73 hints at 3 sets of 7, and also 73 is the 21st prime number, which made that 3 sets of 7 judgment warning sign, because God frequently uses 3 sets of 7 in his prophetic signs to symbolize judgment warning, because the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed after the Hebrews marched for 7 days, and then on the 7th day they blew 7 trumpets with 7 priests. 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7. There are also 3 sets of 7 in the judgment account of Noah's flood. All right, so we have this fire on Cook Street, 2801 Cook Street, on the date 4/15, which again hints at 11. It was 1 year, 11 months, and 1 day after the remains of the golden ray were caught on fire on the prophetic 73rd anniversary of Israel. Okay, the rebirth of Israel, I should say. But also, the date of this fire at 2801 Cook Street on the date 4/15, which hints at the number 11, is also 1 year, 1 month, and 11 days before the rapture on May 26th, 2024. And the rescue of the trapped crew from the golden ray was symbolism for the rapture. So the big story about the cargo ship, the Golden Ray, was after the capsize, the heroic rescue effort to free the trapped crewmen inside the ship. They drilled through the side of the capsized Golden Ray and pulled out the 4 remaining survivors. And this was the big story, and it is symbolism for the rapture, as I will explain. But just from memory, there was a fire inside the ship too. That's another thing, which parallels with everything here too, because we're talking about the fire on St. Simons Island on Cook Street, right? And so the rescue of the trapped crewmen inside the ship involved a fire inside the ship. And so they were roasting inside the ship. And they escaped from this fire, which was symbolism for escaping the fire that will be coming on upon earth, because the end times judgment is symbolized by fire, which contrasts with the judgment of the flood, which was the judgment of the earth by water. And also fire is symbolism for Pentecost, which symbolizes the church. And the reason for that is because on the first Pentecost of the church age, the disciples were waiting in the upper room, and then tongues of fire came down. And on the first Pentecost out of Egypt, smoke and fire came down on the top of Mount Sinai, which is what the first Pentecost of the church age is a parallel to. And so we have this fire symbolism with the church, and the going up, the upper room, which is the rapture. Because the rapture, if you don't know, is when God's faithful will fly and meet the Lord in the clouds. And so that's what happened. Because the cargo ship was flipped on its side, they had to drill into the side of the ship, which was basically drilling down, but they pulled out. They pulled them out of the ship through the side of the ship. Okay, so it was some symbolism for going up, if you will. And so anyway, yeah, so in other words, what I'm saying though is that the rescue of the crewmen in the cargo ship was symbolic of the rapture. And we have this prophetic fire on St. Simons Island that connects to the cargo ship because of when it caught on fire in 2021. And also it connects with the rapture, which will be on May 26, 2024. And both of those connections involve a series of ones, as I just explained, and the fire on Cook Street on the date 4/15 hints at the number 11. And so this is absolutely astounding. And what it is it's also confirmation that the rapture will be on May 26th, 2024. It's also confirmation, as I'm explaining in this video, for the prediction for 19 days later for the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan, the evacuation from and toxic elements, which is what is hinted at with the toxic fire and evacuation on St. Simons Island. All right, I think I explained that. Let's move on. Actually, one other thing too is that when the Hebrews took the Promised Land, when they took Jericho, it was a symbolism for taking the kingdom of God. Claiming their inheritance in the kingdom of God. It was symbolism for the rapture, because there are all kinds of parallels between the book of Joshua and the book of Revelation, and crossing the Jordan River and then taking Jericho is a parallel with us as believers today and being raptured into heaven. And so that's why this 3 sets of 7 and 73 years is also relevant in this trail of signs that leads to the rapture. Because we have Israel, which is hinting at the Hebrews that took the Promised Land, Israel in Jericho. And we have the 3 sets of 7, which was part of the Joshua story when they marched around 7 times over 7 days. And then on the 7th day, they had 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. It was a prophetic 3 sets of 7, which is what is hinted at with this 73 years connection from Israel, Promised Land, to this golden ray, fire. And this is extremely prophetic. This is America. This is God's Gentile nation, which is hinting at the American church. And so the rapture of God's faithful, because the American church is symbolism for all Christians as well. I'm not saying, there are only 2 nations in history that were founded on a relationship with God, Israel and America. And so, like I'm saying, here we have this trail of signs that also then connects extremely profoundly to the rapture with this fire symbolism. And and the taking and the destruction of Jericho is symbolism for the destruction of Babylon in the book of Revelation, and Babylon is consumed by fire. And so it all fits. This is an extremely profound trail of signs is what I'm saying. And this wasn't even the intention of this video, to make a case for the rapture here. Of the date May 26th, there's all kinds of other confirmation from God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that reveals that the rapture will be on May 26th. On Pentecost, by the way, for that matter, come to think of it. This will be the true Pentecost in the calendar that watches for the new moon. And God has demonstrated that Jericho was taken on Pentecost. He has demonstrated this overwhelmingly in his big picture of signs. He demonstrated, for example, in 2018 and 19 and 20, a parallel of signs with the timing of events in the book of Joshua that climaxed with the symbolic day that the walls of Jericho fell on Pentecost. And also from a simple reading from the text in the book of Joshua, it can be easily concluded that it was on Pentecost that the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment. And that's relevant here because we're talking about this parallel with Joshua, and the rapture will be on Pentecost. If you follow what I'm saying, this 73 years, as I just explained, is a parallel with Joshua and 3 sets of 7, and the taking of Israel, the Promised Land, and we have the rapture on Pentecost here. So that's another confirmation. This is really amazing. As was explained in the April 13th email thread The signs involving Massachusetts on April 13th and the date 5/4 hint at the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. After departing Massachusetts, the soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts were sent to St. Simons Island. So I just want to interject here. If you haven't already watched the 54th Massachusetts prophecy video on this channel, you probably should pause this video and go watch that and come back. Like I've said in other videos, that video is arguably the most important. Okay, the reason why the dirty bomb will explode on the date 5/4, May 4th, is because it is pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which is confirmed, or which was confirmed through the prophetic signs God provided on the date April 13th. Okay, so anyway, if you've watched that video, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I recommend watching that now. So let's continue. After departing Massachusetts, this is huge. This is so huge, so profound, because this is where the 54th Massachusetts Regiment went. After they completed their training in Massachusetts, they went to St. Simons Island. It's so amazing. So after departing Massachusetts, the soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts were sent to St. Simons Island. The famous, courageous effort that will be forever remembered in U.S. history was on the beach in the Battle of Fort Wagner. The historian in the documentary I linked to, I'll have to remember to try to leave the link to this documentary in the description box below this video, but I'm writing to my friends again. Again, I am writing to my friends in this email, so I'm just reading the email. The historian in the documentary I linked to said this was the most noble, self-effacing effort in the Civil War. The movie Glory told the story of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, and the portrayal of this battle on this beach was filmed on Jekyll Island, on what is today named Glory Beach. The story of the 54th Massachusetts, and by the way, that's how I connected everything, just for your information. When I first realized that God was using the date 5/4 to point to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, it was upon learning that on Jekyll Island there is this beach named Glory, named after the movie Glory, because it was filmed on this beach. And that's when it all clicked. And that was only learned because of the fire on St. Simons Island, which inspired me to look up again the Golden Ray and the prophetic significance of Jekyll Island. Okay, so the story of the 54th Massachusetts is about, the movie Glory told the story about the 54th Massachusetts and the portrayal of this battle on this beach of Fort Wagner. Well, the beach, okay, so the famous battle is Fort Wagner, and it was on the beach, but it was filmed on Jekyll Island, okay, on what is today named Glory Beach. The story of the 54th Massachusetts is about slavery and freedom. In the Bible, the Hebrew slaves were freed from their bondage to Pharaoh in Egypt after 400 years of affliction. The fire and evacuation from St. Simons Island on April 15th was exactly 400 months after the release of the movie Glory. 400 exclamation marks, as I wrote in the email. Yes, this is astounding beyond words. Okay. So this fire and evacuation on St. Simons Island was 400 months exactly after the release of the movie Glory. All right, and I need to make a correction. I need to apologize, because in the 54th Regiment prophecy video on this channel, I had said, I made a mistake, I was confused. I had said that April 13th was exactly 400 months after the release of the movie Glory. April 13th, again, was the date of the signs that revealed the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. There's a big, important step in the trail of signs that's leading to May 4th, the penultimate climactic date, if you will, And again, those signs were hinting at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, as was explained. And although that date isn't exactly, it's 400 months after the movie Glory was released, it's 2 days shy of it. The exact 400 months is April 15th, which is arguably even more amazing, because on April 15th, we had this prophetic fire on St. Simons Island, which is where the 54th Massachusetts Regiment went. Furthermore, this is the area in which they fought and their heroic battles, and for which the movie Glory is made. It depicts these battles. And Jekyll Island, where Glory Beach is, the beach that's named after where the movie was filmed, is right next to St. Simons Island. And in between these islands is the bay in which the Golden Ray cargo ship capsized. So it's truly profound that this prophetic fire on St. Simons Island is exactly 400 months, because this is what it's all about. This is the reason why God is pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War, because he's pointing to this theme of slavery and freedom, which is the theme of the Bible and the theme of life. It's the theme of everything. And so that's why the relevance of 400, because in the Bible, the Hebrews were afflicted for 400 years. This is an important number in that story. This number of years of slavery for the Hebrews is also in the New Testament as well. So this is an important number, 400. And as I explained in the other videos, 400 furthermore is prophetic because we are now at the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims' Landing, and the Pilgrims saw their crossing of the Atlantic and their escape from religious and political persecution as a parallel to the escape of religious persecution from Pharaoh, the type for the Antichrist in Egypt, and their crossing of the Red Sea and the Jordan River. Okay, so let's move on. But I think you can appreciate this now. This 400 months connection is truly remarkable. It provides indisputable confirmation for the prophetic significance of this fire on St. Simons Island. Again, to be clear, because I don't think I was, the Hebrews were afflicted for 400 years. The Hebrews left Egypt after being slaves in Egypt. And of course, the Civil War is about slavery and freedom. Now, as I wrote in the email, G280 is the word for riddle, enigma. Okay, so Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, the 280th word, G280, is the word for riddle, enigma. Exactly, and the reason he uses this too is it's a play on 40 weeks, because 280 is 7 times 40. 280 days is 40 weeks. And God uses 40 weeks connections frequently, because when the disciples asked Jesus for the signs of his return to look for, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains. And according to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. And so God uses frequently 40 weeks connections in his prophetic signs. And 40 weeks is 280 days. And so that's why God has also aligned this connection to this meaning of 280 in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for riddle, enigma. And that's why 40 weeks also, these connections in God's big picture of signs, is because they're part of the God revealing his big picture to those that seek the matter out. Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter and the honor of kings to search a matter out. Searching a matter out is, in essence, uncovering a riddle or an enigma. Okay, so now that I've established that, see, it's really difficult to explain God's big picture of science because there's so much to explain to someone that's brand new to this. And when I'm writing these emails, I'm explaining to people that already know the foundations, the basics, right? So in other words, though, if you know, like you've listened to a lot of these videos and you already know these basics and you're hearing me repeat them, please be patient, because there are other people that don't know these basics. Like, for example, the meaning or the significance of 40 weeks and 280 days. Okay, so exactly 280 months after the release of the movie Glory, about a famous battle in the Civil War regarding the regiment from Massachusetts was the Boston bombing in 2013 on the holiday of Patriots' Day in the state of Massachusetts that commemorates the famous battle that began the Revolutionary War in Massachusetts, the battles of Lexington and Concord. So that's the Boston bombing. It occurred on Patriots' Day, which is tied to American history because of the Revolutionary War. But the bombing on April 15th, 2013 is exactly 280 months after the release of the movie Glory. Right? So that's astounding, which also makes it incidentally an exact 120 months to the prophetic fire on St. Simon's Island. And 120 is the number that God gave Noah in regards to the timing of God's impending judgment, as I'm about to write in the email. I just got ahead of myself there. So in turn, the Boston bombing was exactly 120 months to the day that the bomb was thrown at the Prime Minister of Japan on the day of the fire and evacuation of St. Simon's Island. So this is another prophetic sign. That's explained in another, I'm pretty sure it's explained in another email thread. So I'm not going to explain it here. But it's very, very important. But the Boston bombing ties to the bomb. It was like a smoke bomb that was thrown at the Prime Minister of Japan on the same day as the fire and smoke, toxic fire and evacuation on St. Simon's Island. And of course, the Japanese Prime Minister and those around him evacuated the area from where he was attacked with the smoke bomb, and then he delivered his speech that he was going to give in another place. So that's also symbolic of the evacuation. He relocated and gave his speech somewhere else. Let's move on. Okay, and so, and again, this fire on St. Simon's Island and the bomb and Japan symbolizes bomb because, of course, World War II and the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan. That's another thing. And that's all, of course, because of the Manhattan Project. And we're talking about the ultimate prediction here being the evacuation of Manhattan Island. So it's really just, it's so amazing, the big picture here, right? How it all connects. So anyway, what I was saying is that this April 15th, 2023 date, which included the bomb in Japan, the smoke bomb and evacuation, and the fire and evacuation of St. Simon's Island, which hints at Manhattan Island and the evacuation of Manhattan Island from the toxic, dirty bomb. Okay, and this connects with the predicted dirty bomb and evacuation of Manhattan Island. Basically, I just said what I just said a minute ago. What is very significant with all of this is the incorporation of the capsized golden ray. The capsize of the massive cargo ship was symbolism for the halt of international trade. It collapsed next to Jekyll Island, which pointed to the collapse of the banking system. Now, the Lord has connected this to the dirty bomb and evacuation of Manhattan Island. In other words, it is crystal clear that the dirty bomb on Manhattan Island will trigger the collapse of the financial markets and banking system, which will usher in the new replacement system, which will be led by the Federal Reserve and will employ its new digital currency, which will be used to persecute God's people and enslave Americans, which is why it all ties to the theme of slavery and freedom and the Civil War and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War. And furthermore, the Revolutionary War, as I just explained, because that was also a war for freedom and against slavery. The oppressive laws of the British and taxation. Just like the theme within the 54th Massachusetts Regiment when they were paid $10 when the other Union soldiers were paid $13. Symbolism for oppressive minority laws, which will be what will be enforced through the digital currency from the Federal Reserve. So that's the end goal here the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the 400 months too, by the way, because that hints at Pharaoh, who is a type for the Antichrist in the story of Exodus. And also the number 13 is symbolism for the Antichrist. That's why the $13, right? In the Bible, the number 13 is symbolism for the Antichrist. I've explained that many times. So that's the ultimate goal here, and that will be achieved through the triggering of the collapse of the financial markets, which will be triggered by the dirty bomb in Manhattan. And that's why all of this ties to the Golden Ray cargo ship, which is symbolism for the collapse of the financial markets and international trade, commerce, because of the capsize of this ship. Symbolism is symbolism for that. And this occurred, the capsize of this ship, just off the coast of Jekyll Island, which is symbolic of the Federal Reserve. That's why I knew back in September of 2019, as I explained, that ultimately this prophetic sign would somehow connect to the exact precise day of the collapse of the financial markets. And that was a long time ago. That was 2019. It was always on the back shelf. I never forgot about it, but it was out of my mind. I knew, but it came up because of this fire on St. Simon's Island, which was designed by God for it to come up. And so I will continue now to confirm what I just said, this prediction, if you will, this profound statement that what will trigger the financial collapse and chaos in the financial markets will be this dirty bomb in Manhattan, and that God will prove all of what I'm saying through the prediction. But the reason why this is known is because of this connection to the capsized Golden Ray just off the shore of St. Simon's Island. St. Simon's Island fire is pointing to the dirty bomb, but the capsized ship is pointing to the collapse of international trade and the financial markets in Jekyll Island. So I think I've made that clear now. So as I mentioned, I was reading from an email, and so I didn't have the ability to point to the diagram as I was explaining things. There were a couple of things that I left out now that I have the opportunity to just talk while looking at the diagram. And what it also confirms this connection from this prophetic fire on the Golden Ray is that this connection, the 1 year, 11 months and 1 day, followed by the 1 year, 1 month and 11 days, which centers on this date, which hints at 11. The date itself, 15 minus 4 is 11, and the address hints at 11. But what also confirms this as another second witness is this connection is, in fact, also 1109 days, which is supremely prophetic because God pairs 9 and 110 together as symbolism for 9/11. And so I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain this. It's very profound. It's worthwhile. Just take a couple of minutes, and then I'll return to more amazing things and 2 more diagrams. Jesus' official arrival into Jerusalem and first coming was on the 10th day of the first month in the Hebrew calendar. This is 110, and this hints at the number 110. In the book of Joshua, the date on which the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan River and officially entered the Promised Land was also on the 10th day of the first month, which is 110 and hints at the number 110. Jesus' first coming is symbolized by the number 110. This is why on 9/11, the 2 towers that collapsed were each 110 stories high. The collapse of 2 towers that were 110 floors was symbolism for Jesus' second coming. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the twin towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God, Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world. The Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. After the judgment warning of 9/11, America was given a period of grace to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a complete period of waiting. Jacob waited 20 years to get possession of his wives and property. The children of Israel waited 20 years to be freed of Jabin, the king of Canaan, when they were freed from bondage by Deborah and Barak. The Ark of the Covenant waited 20 years in Kiriath-Jearim, and Solomon spent 20 years building his home and the house of God. On the 20th anniversary of the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 was the sudden collapse of America's presence in Afghanistan, and the iconic scene of this was the U.S. Air Force plane leaving the airport in Afghanistan, and the big number on the side of its plane is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. And one other thing maybe worth mentioning here is that we're coming up on the 110th anniversary of Jekyll Island and the creation of the Federal Reserve. I don't know. I think that this is meaningful. I think because of other connections too, that this is meaningful. But we'll see. I'm not making any predictions to occur on this date. There might be a prophetic sign or some event. But it just is interesting that this event that will trigger the financial collapse is what I'm predicting. The dirty bomb will trigger the financial markets collapse, which will lead to the Federal Reserve digital currency. It is exactly 4 times 8 weeks, which is relevant because God uses this to hint at the 48th president. This isn't the only connection involving a 4 times 8, 32. It's 32 weeks. So, and of course, the Antichrist, the 48th president, Barack Obama, who will become president again, after Michelle Obama will become the 47th president. The Antichrist will enforce the mark of the Antichrist and through digital currency. And so that's why this is very interesting. All right, I just want to demonstrate here, because I didn't earlier, this email was written the day after the prophetic fire on St. Simon's Island, April 16th, right? And to prove that, we can see that right here. Okay. But of course, the date that this video is posted also proves that this is a prediction being made before May 4th. And so does the forensic notes document as well, as I said earlier. So there are 2 other truly astounding diagrams to explain here. The first bit was an explanation of the one diagram. And so now I'm going to explain these other 2 diagrams. So as I wrote, these next 2 diagrams are astounding beyond words, but I think they are self-explanatory with just a little bit of close study, keeping in mind that pairing of numbers confirms the connections. I will also explain them in a video. However, the extremely important takeaway is that on the Monday and Tuesday after the dirty bomb, which will be on Thursday, May 4th, something devastating will happen in the financial markets. Probably a complete collapse or something. In this diagram here, this is beyond words amazing as well. And so this is the date here of the rescue. The ship capsized the day before on the 8th of September. The following day was when the trapped crew were rescued. Again, it was off the shore of Jekyll Island. There were 4 rescued, and Jekyll Island is part of Georgia, which is the 4th state to join the Union. 4 rescued, and the 4th state hints at 44, the identity of the Antichrist, the 44th president. 4 rescued in the 4th state on the date of the 9th of the month, in the 9th month of the year, hints at 9 divided by 4 equals 0.44. Also, 99 divided by 4 rescued. The date 99 would hint at also 99 divided by 4 rescued on this date, hints at 0.404 into infinity. That also is a hint at 44, the 44th president. Among the 4 that were rescued, 2 were rescued from deck number 4, which gives us or hints at 2 fours, which again hints at 44, the identity of the Antichrist. One of the others was was on deck 2 when the ship capsized. The other was on deck 3, which gives us 2 and 3, which hints at 23. And the reason why 23 is prophetic is because it is made up of 2 and 3. And this is because Jesus told Peter that the rooster would not crow twice before he would deny him 3 times. Denying Jesus is tantamount to, or rather, taking the mark of the Antichrist is tantamount to denying Jesus. This is the purpose of the Antichrist, is to employ the mark of the Antichrist, which will serve as a vehicle for testing the faith of quote-unquote Christians. And that's the purpose of the end times, in fact. The main purpose is the church, the testing of the faith of Christians, and those that will come to faith during the end times, for that matter, too, to the truth. But this is all rooted in why 23 is it's rooted in the Gospel of Mark, when Jesus said that the rooster would not crow twice before Peter would deny him 3 times. And by the way, I won't explain it, but on the prophetic Super Bowl on the date 2-3, which was all about the number 23 in 2019, one of the signs was the amazing thing was that there was the Sydney, Australia Roosters football team that put up billboards all over Atlanta in a tongue-in-cheek promotion of their football league, claiming that they were the world champions of football. But they were named the Roosters. And prior to that, I thought, God was pointing to all these 2s and 3s, for example, even the date 2-3 in that Super Bowl. I wonder if there's a rooster sign, I thought. I wonder if there's a rooster sign in that Super Bowl. And sure enough, when I did the search, it came up that this was a national news story, and it was covered in other words, the American national news, how there was this Sydney Roosters team at the time putting up billboards all over Atlanta promoting their Sydney Roosters football team that had just won their championship. So anyway, that, in other words, it's confirmation that 2 and 3, in fact, hints at 23. And the reason why 23 also is it reveals the identity of the Antichrist. The basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. And this basketball president was the 44th president. And so that's why God pairs 44 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections. And here we have that in this rescue of the 4 from the cargo ship. Because again, it was 4 rescued in the 4th state. That's a 44, but 2 of them were rescued on the 2nd deck, which hints at 2 4s and 44. And then the other 2 were at the time of the capsize on deck 2 and 3. And so that gives us a 2 and 3, which hints at 23, which gives us a pairing of 23 and 44. It's absolutely astounding. And it reveals that the Antichrist, from whom God's faithful will be rescued in the rapture, which is what, again, as I explained earlier, this rescue is symbolic of the rapture, when they were pulled from the fire through the ceiling through the hole cut above them in the side of the cargo ship, this heroic rescue. Okay, so that was all symbolism for the rapture, as I explained. And so who were they raptured from? The Antichrist, the 44th president that wore jersey number 23. I just reread the information on the Wikipedia page regarding this Golden Ray cargo ship, and it was a total of 23 crewmen that were on the ship when it capsized. So not only do we have the 23 from the one from the 2nd deck and one on the 3rd deck at the time that it capsized, But there were also a total of 23 crewmen on the ship at the time that it capsized. And all 23 survived. Not only that, but the number of cars is a big part of this story. The capsize of the ship was the result of the uneven distribution of their cargo load of cars, vehicles, and so that's a big part of the story because the ship was making a sharp turn as it was coming out of the bay, and it just capsized because of the distribution of the weight of the cars. And how many cars were there would be a good question. There would be a meaningful number, you would think, in this prophetic sign. Well, there was 4,000 cars. There was 4,000 cars, 4 were rescued, and this was the 4th state. So that's another confirmation of 4s, hinting at 44, which pairs with the 23 crewmen. And the Wikipedia page says it's approximately 4,300 cars. So, I mean, it's pretty close to 4,400, but it's not. So we'll just leave it at that. It's not necessary anyway because it's 4,000 and something. And 4,300 rounded down to the nearest 1,000 is 4,000. So there you have it. It's amazing. When you go over the information, each time the Holy Spirit shows you something new. Because 4,300 is extremely prophetic. Because it hints at 430. That's why it was 4,300 cars. It isn't a random number that simply points to 4,000. It's exact. It's specific, as we would expect from God. 4,300 hints at 430. And the 430th word in Strong's Concordance is the word God. But more than that, the number 430 is from the Bible in regards to the 430 years that at the time of the Exodus. Okay, so again, this whole story that's being told here through God's signs is about the theme of the Bible and the theme of life, which is slavery and freedom. As it has been explained, this is all leading to the date 5/4, May 4th, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War. And they were first sent to St. Simons Island, which is all part of this sign, as I've already explained, right? And I already explained the significance of 400 because the Hebrews were afflicted for 400 years. And that timeline begins with Ishmael picking on Isaac. Ishmael was the son of Hagar, the servant from Egypt. So this is the beginning of affliction, and there is Egypt in that. But 430 years from the time of the promise that was given to Abraham regarding Abraham's descendants that would need to go through Egypt in order to then receive the promised land. It's 430 years from then to the Exodus. So it's 400 years back from the Exodus to the time of the affliction, beginning with the son of the Egyptian servant, Ishmael. And then it's 430 years back from the Exodus to the promise to Abraham. And so anyway, the point is 430 hints at the Exodus, which is all about the liberation from slavery. And in the Bible, Egypt symbolizes the world, and the slavery symbolizes our bondage to sin, from which we get liberated through our liberator, Lord Jesus Christ, for which a type that foreshadows this is Moses. And so that's why this is extremely relevant, that this ship that capsized near Jekyll Island and St. Simons Island, which points to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the Federal Reserve digital currency that's coming that will enslave people, as I have explained and am explaining. That's relevant, and that's why it was 4,300 cars, because it hints at 430, which is a very important number that symbolizes the Exodus and slavery, liberation from slavery and freedom. Now, in the Bible, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is symbolism or a type for the Antichrist. And the Pharaoh in Egypt, in the book of Genesis, made Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob. The Pharaoh, king of Egypt, made Joseph a king or a ruler in Egypt at the age of 30 years. This is why the number 30 is symbolism for a king. King David was also made a king at the age of 30 years old. And it's a period of time, 30 years. That's why here we have this exact 30 months connection to this date here involving this prophetic sign, a very, very important prophetic sign involving Joseph Biden, a ruler that was made king by Satan. And Joseph in the Bible was made a ruler in Egypt, after he interpreted the dream of the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh's dream regarding 2 sets of 7 cows. The 7 cows that represented a period of 7 years of prosperity. And these first 7 cows of prosperity were followed by another 7 cows that were sickly cows that were symbolism for the coming future 7 years of famine in Egypt. And also in Bible prophecy, 7 years is symbolic of the end times period. And so the 7 cows of famine were symbolism or a type or a shadow, a foreshadow of the end times period. But this is why this 30 months connection is followed by exactly 7 plus 7 months from this Joseph Biden sign, because this hints at the 2 sets of 7 cows that Joseph in the Bible, in the dream that Joseph interpreted. This is truly profound, because this was the day of the news of the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance ship. This was, first of all, another ship, another historic ship, another famous ship, the Endurance ship, just like the Golden Ray cargo ship. So we have ship sign to ship sign to begin with. But this is much more than that, because this was the same day that Joe Biden gave his executive order regarding the directive for the Federal Reserve to create digital currency. This was the executive order from Joe Biden for his digital currency on this date. And again, this ship capsized next to Jekyll Island, the location where the Federal Reserve was created. This is astounding. So, as I've mentioned, as I'm explaining, this is about the Antichrist that will use the mark of the Antichrist, which will be enforced through digital currency. What is going to happen is that those that don't take this thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just think about it a little bit and think about why I can't say what it is. The thing is the mark of the Antichrist, the snake bite, and it will be enforced through digital currency. An individual will not be able to buy or sell food, as is described in Revelation chapter 6, unless they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? This will be the way, because food will be rationed after the coming disasters, including the eruption of Yellowstone in the 44th state to join the Union, Wyoming. Food will be rationed, and which, by the way, is why we have a connection of 42 weeks right here, because 42 in Bible prophecy is symbolism for the Antichrist, the period of the Antichrist's rule, 42 months, hence 42 weeks. This is the date it is predicted that Yellowstone will erupt on the same day as the catastrophic solar flare coronal mass ejection will knock out power and cause massive disruptions of energy, and which will lead to a food shortage, and food will be rationed. But anyway, this ties into the creation of the digital currency that will be the result of the financial markets collapse due to the dirty bomb. So that's why. Anyway, going back to what I was saying over here, that's the reason for the endurance ship, because as I'm saying, and what Bible prophecy says, is the end times is a test of endurance of the faith of the God's faithful, and they will have to endure this persecution from the Antichrist, which will come through the mark of the Antichrist, which will be enforced through digital currency. And that's why the endurance ship. The story of Shackleton's journey is the most epic in all of history story of endurance. And what I'm going to do, I think, is interrupt here and play a short clip from another video I made about this prophetic sign. And then I'll return. On Saturday, March 5th, Shackleton's ship Endurance was discovered at the bottom of the ocean near Antarctica. The official announcement of the discovery wasn't until the 9th. This is an amazing parallel. Trump made an emergency landing in his plane on the 5th, but the news didn't break until the 9th, and the ship Endurance was discovered on the 5th, and the news didn't break until the 9th. Trump will die from a heart attack, and Shackleton's ship was discovered exactly on the 100th anniversary of Shackleton's funeral on South Georgia Island near Antarctica. Shackleton unexpectedly died from a heart attack on his way to Antarctica. Trump will also die unexpectedly of a heart attack on August 18th, 2023. The news of the discovery of Shackleton's ship Endurance came on March 9th, which is 3-9, which hints at 9 plus 9 plus 9, which God uses as judgment symbolism, and the number 27 symbolizes this. And on Shackleton's ship Endurance, it was a crew of 27 men in the expedition. It is amazing that Shackleton died on his way to Antarctica, and that he had his funeral and is buried on South Georgia Island. This is because a major part of the most heroic and intense journey of perseverance and endurance, arguably in history, which was Shackleton's expedition, involved South Georgia Island. Once they disembarked the ship, they experienced their tribulation experiences, endeavors on the ice floe. They also set up, for example, Camp Patience, endurance, tribulation, patient endurance of the saints during the tribulation period, for example. Okay, so that their experience on the ice floe, which I forget how long that lasted, but it lasted quite a number of days. It lasted a few months until springtime. They had to patiently wait for the ice to break up. And that was followed by their epic sea journey on the dangerous South Atlantic Antarctica Ocean to Elephant Island. Upon reaching Elephant Island, half of the crew were left behind, and 6 men continued on to South Georgia Island, which was an even more arduous journey and extreme story of survival. And by the way, this whole Endurance Shackleton story is arguably the most extreme story of human endurance and survival of all time. There was 2 legs of the sea journey, which hints at the times. So the ice floe time, sea journeys, 2 of them, times. And then once they reached South Georgia Island, they reached the south side. They had to cross over the island to the other side of the island where the whaling station was. South Georgia was an uncharted island, and they had to cross a mountain range. And so 3 people were left on the shore of South Georgia, and only 3 continued on. And that symbolized the easing of the journey. But that was an extremely arduous journey as well. But that was arguably the easing, symbolizing the easing of the tribulation. So we have the times and a half time. The ice floe, the 2 sea journeys, and then the crossing of the island. Also on March 9th, the day of the announcement of Trump's emergency plane landing, and the day of the announcement of the discovery of Shackleton's ship Endurance, Biden announced and signed an executive order, a 7-month timeline for the development of a new digital currency. which is completely Antichrist, because the mark of the Antichrist will require participation in the program. Otherwise, you won't be able to, quote, buy or sell, end quote, as it says in the Bible, and this will be enforced through the digital currency. The fact that it is supposed to be implemented according to this announcement of Biden on March 9th, 7 months later, in early October, lines up perfectly with just after the eruption of Yellowstone and other volcanoes, which will put ash into the atmosphere and cause climate change and food shortages, and food will be rationed to only those that have taken the mark of the Antichrist, and this will be enforced through the digital currency. And Bible prophecy says that if one takes this mark of the Antichrist, they go to hell. Therefore, it is a test of endurance, a test of faith. It will be extremely inconvenient and could cost you your life through starvation and other ways to resist the mark of the Antichrist. And so it is absolutely perfect that Biden's announcement of this digital currency coincided with the same day as the discovery of Shackleton's Endurance ship, on the same day as the news broke about Trump's emergency plane landing due to engine failure of his Dassault Falcon 900. Also in Bible prophecy, a period of 7 years is symbolism for the end times period of the Antichrist's rule. And in God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he uses 7 months connections as symbolism for this symbolic 7 years. All right, now, the thing is that this announcement of this discovery of the Endurance ship came on the 9th, but it was actually discovered on the 5th. The news was on the 9th, making it prophetic, making the 9th prophetically related to this sign. But what confirms that, too, is that on the 9th, the news was announced that Trump had a plane emergency, but the plane emergency was likewise on the 5th. Trump's plane emergency, he had to make an emergency landing in his Trump plane on the 5th, but no one knew about it. The news didn't know about it until the 9th. Likewise, the Endurance ship discovery. But there's more to all of that, of course, which is explained in the Endurance ship video. I don't know if that's exactly going to be the title or whether it's going to be the Trump plane prophecy title will be the title of that video. But, watch all of the videos anyway once the prediction comes to pass. But the point, too, is that Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. Because in archaic English, the word trump means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. And God was trumpeting through the parallel with the Endurance ship, the coming endurance of the saints. And I don't mean that in the Catholic sense. I mean, in the Bible, saints refers to God's people, all of them. And anyway, the endurance of the saints in the end times. It will through the mark of the Antichrist. And so anyway, that's why Trump ties into this too. God is trumpeting this, and he's trumpeting the importance of the executive order of the digital currency, which will be in an emergency. It'll come about through an emergency, but it is an emergency for God's people. All right, now that it has been explained that the digital currency will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which will be implemented to ensure that one will not be able to buy or sell food unless they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. We can see, because of a food shortage, we can see the direct relevance with the dream that Joseph interpreted regarding the 7 cows of famine. So it's astounding that we have from this Endurance ship prophecy sign, prophetic sign, and Joseph Biden's announcement, executive order for a digital currency. It is astounding that it is 7 plus 7 months, because this hints at the dream that Joseph interpreted, and that includes the 7 cows of famine. And the 7 cows of famine symbolize, or is a foreshadow for the end times period that is also symbolized by 7 years. It isn't a literal 7 years, and we are already way inside the 7 years. But that 7 years in the dream is about famine, and so will the digital currency be about famine. So that's why it's astounding. The announcement from Joseph Biden, the executive order on the day of the announcement of the endurance ship, is exactly 7 plus 7 months to state here. And so this 30 months and 7 plus 7 months is also 44 months. And that's, of course, extremely relevant because, as I just explained, it connects with the date that 4 were rescued from the 4th state, including 2 from deck number 4, which gives us 44 as well. You add 44 months exactly to get this date here, which will be Tuesday, May 9th, 2023. The dirty bomb will be on the Thursday. I assume that the markets will close, and then they will be closed on the Friday, and probably they'll try to open them somehow on the Monday and Tuesday, and that's when the financial markets will collapse. This is just speculation, but what I know for sure is that it's not a coincidence that it's 44 months. And this occurred on the 9th. It doesn't connect with 44 months exactly to May 4th, the date of the predicted dirty bomb. It connects with exactly 44 months to this date. Furthermore, the collapse, the capsize was on the 8th, and 44 months exactly from the 8th gets us to the Monday. That's why I'm saying Monday and Tuesday will be some sort of big event in the financial markets, because this is all about the financial markets, Jekyll Island, and commerce with the Golden Ray cargo ship. So that's why I'm saying the 9th here. And again, you know, like I said, I always knew that the capsizes of the cargo ship would connect to the day of the collapse of the financial markets. I knew that back in 2019, and here we have it. It's so profound. We have the exact 44 months, which is what I was waiting for all along, but didn't realize it was going to be that long. It didn't realize it would take 44 months, but here we have it. It's clear as day because of this, the 4 rescued in the 4th state. Okay, which will cause the bank run and Jekyll Island Federal Reserve, and they'll have to come in and save the day somehow and bail out every bank, and in the process implement the digital currency. One other thing too is that it's very interesting that this date here is exactly 777 days, which would be a hint at 3 sets of 7, as I explained earlier, God uses as judgment for the collapse of security, and it is collapse symbolism, and it is pointing to the predicted collapse of the financial system and the banks. And what do we have it connect to? The day that the cargo ship, the massive cargo ship, got stuck on the Suez Canal, blocking $9 billion of trade per day. It clogged the world's trade artery at the time of the beginning of the giving people the mark of the Antichrist, and the clogging of the trade artery was symbolism for the clogging of you-know-what inside people. And because of the taking the mark, the snake bite, which is, by the way, what snake bites do. That's what venom does. It creates CLOTs inside people's ARTERYs or IEs. Anyway, that's what was a symbolism for the clogging of the world's trade artery, but it was 9 billion, which is, of course, again, the number that symbolizes God's judgment, the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And so we have this cargo ship symbolism, and it connects in this diagram, as you can see very clearly, to this cargo ship and this ship, which connects to this, the collapse, the predicted collapse of the financial market. All right, we have this last diagram here. And here was the date that the Golden Ray cargo ship capsized next to Jekyll Island, exactly 44 months before this date, which will be Monday, May 8th, the predicted date of a stock market collapse and financial system collapse, which is again why this cargo ship that represented international trade and commerce collapsed, this massive cargo ship next to Jekyll Island, the location that the Federal Reserve was created. And what we have here with this 44 months is, well, God pairs 17 and 44, and he pairs 9 and 17 in his signs to confirm, and he pairs 9 and 44. He pairs all these three numbers together, actually. And the reason for number 17 is that a goat is symbolism for the Antichrist. And in ancient Israel, the Jews would conduct a ritual sacrifice on the Day of Atonement on the Temple Mount involving a goat. And the Day of Atonement is the 10th day of the 7th month, which the number 17 symbolizes. Okay, and the Antichrist, because the goat is a symbolic of the Antichrist will be defeated on the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ, at his second coming, on the Day of Atonement. So again, 17. Also in the book of Revelation, a beast is used as a metaphor for the Antichrist, and this beast has 10 heads and 7 horns, for which the number 17 also symbolizes. Okay? The Antichrist was president, the 44th president was president from 2009 until 2017. This is why this is astounding. Okay? 27, 9 plus 9 plus 9, is an emphasis of the number 9, the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. As from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. His big picture of signs, it's only being explained on this channel. And so we have the 44th president, who was president from 2009 until 2017. This president was also arrived in Washington, D.C. first as the senator from Illinois during the 109th Congress, and lived on 109th Street while studying at Columbia University, and will return to the District of Columbia as a result of the president that was installed at the beginning of the 117th Congress, at the beginning of the mark of the Antichrist in January of 2021. And also, this president was the rainbow president that lit up the White House in rainbow colors. And the rainbow is God's sign regarding judgment, described in the last verse of the book of Genesis, chapter 7, the flood account in Genesis 9:17. Sorry, the flood account begins in chapter 7. It's the rainbow is described in the last verse of the account, which is Genesis 9:17. Also, Constitution Day is 9/17, and there is a connection between Barack Obama and the Constitution. And so, furthermore, he was the president from 2009 until 2017, and the Antichrist will trample on the Constitution. Also, the day he lit up the White House in rainbow colors was the 9th of Tammuz in the Hebrew calendar, and on the 9th and 17th of Tammuz in the Hebrew calendar in the Bible, the Babylonians and then the Romans breached the security walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem, which is symbolic of the walls of security collapsing and being breached of America with the Antichrist, the president that was the 44th, and from 2009 until 2017. All right, now, since this is broken down, this connection of 44 months is broken into this connection of exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 months, and then 17 months to and from this date, which was December 8th, 2021. This was the day that the woman, and her name was never revealed in the news, because it's beautiful. It's because it's confirmation that it's a sign from God that this woman was nameless, even days following the sign. She drowned in the Niagara Falls River. This is because it hints at Revelation chapter 12, when the woman, and she's described as a woman in Revelation chapter 12, there's a part of that description in chapter 12 where the dragon, which is symbolism for Satan and the Antichrist, attempts to drown the woman with a river of water, and that's what the Niagara Falls was doing in this prophetic sign. She drove her car into the Niagara River from Goat Island. Goat Island is in the Niagara River. Goat, again, is symbolic of the Antichrist. And again, as I mentioned, as I explained, the number 17 is tied to the goat symbolism in the Bible, the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. And so that's why it's astounding we have the exact 17 months from this Goat Island sign. This isn't the only Goat Island sign, by the way. There was the famous tightrope walk that Nick Wallenda, a man that God uses in his prophetic signs, when he walked from Goat Island across to Table Rock. And in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus. Goat is symbolism for the Antichrist. He walked the tightrope. Nick Wallenda has said that his tightrope walks are his ministry for God, for Jesus. And they are symbolic. I don't know if he's actually said this himself, but they are symbolic of the tightrope and his balancing pole being a cross with a man at the center, him, holding the balancing pole. Anyway, so that's another Niagara Falls sign involving Goat Island. And Nick Wallenda lives near Table Rock Lake, which is another prophetic sign, the duck boat tragedy. But that's going off onto a tangent, a rabbit trail, which I will refrain from doing because that's so difficult to refrain from to explain God's signs. Because it's an interconnected web, and when you try to describe one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. And so anyway, but this Niagara Falls sign, this date is astounding because it connects to these other Niagara Falls signs, these extremely profound signs. Now, let's just go to this one first. Speaking of 9 and 17, 9 plus 9 plus 9 months and 17 months, we have this 9 months and 17 days connection, which is a connection God uses frequently, 9 months and 17 days. It is exactly 9 months and 17 days back from this Niagara Falls sign involving the woman that drowned, which was Revelation chapter 12 symbolism, to the day that it was in the news, national news, international news, that Niagara Falls had stopped flowing because it had frozen. It froze. At least on the American side. I'm not sure how it would, if it froze, would it completely stop? But I'm sorry, I apologize. I forget. Maybe the entire falls froze. But we, in the news, were shown pictures, images, and video of the Niagara Falls being frozen and a rainbow over it and everything. And so this was the 22nd day of the second month, February 22nd, 2021, exactly 3 years before the predicted solar storm and eruption of Yellowstone volcano. Sorry, that's about to go on to another rabbit trail. I apologize. Let's stay focused. Okay, this sign here was exactly 40 weeks, and I think I mentioned earlier, but I'll just explain it again. When the disciples asked Jesus for the signs of his return to look for, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains. And according to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. Hence, 40 weeks connections are extremely prophetic in God's prophetic signs. And we have another flood symbolic sign here, which connects to this flood symbolism sign because Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism. It symbolizes the power of water moving over the earth, and also God has used Niagara, and it also engenders a perennial rainbow, which is described in the account of Noah's flood. But also Niagara Falls is the location of the most dramatic, there was this barge. This barge got stuck on the Niagara River in 1918, the year of Spanish flu, at the peak of it, and it's involved in the most dramatic rescue in the history of Niagara Falls. And so the barge is symbolic of Noah's Ark, which rescued Noah and his family. I'll get to that in a second. And so anyway, Niagara Falls is Noah's flood symbolism, and so is this flood that flooded Midland, Michigan. This disaster, major disaster, if you recall, in May of 2020, when Midland, Michigan was flooded, the downtown, and it was because of the dam breaking, and that's Noah's flood symbolism too, because the waters burst forth from the deep, and that's symbolic of a dam bursting, or vice versa. And so this dam burst. It was an electric dam, which is why it connects with 40 weeks and then 3 years to the solar storm, which will knock out electricity. It was a power dam. That was a major part of the story. It was the power dam company and its negligence. That was the central thing about the story, one of them. And so the dam burst, and then the river, I forget the name of the river now, but it caused the massive flooding down the river all the way down to Michigan, Midland, Michigan. And so the governor of Michigan declared a state of emergency, and it was expected that there would be 9 feet of water in downtown Midland, Michigan, and 11,000 people were evacuated. And that's clear 9/11 symbolism, the big judgment warning sign. Now, the thing is that Midland, Michigan is the location of the headquarters for the Dow Chemical Company. And I always knew back then that this state here would somehow eventually connect precisely to the date of the financial market, the collapse of the financial markets and the stock market, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, in other words. I knew that back then because of this Dow symbolism. And prior to that, I had even known that a dam prophetic sign would be symbolic of the flooding, the dam bursting of the stock market. I knew that too, even before this sign. But anyway, when it was learned that Midland is the location of the headquarters of Dow Chemical Company, I knew then for sure that it would connect precisely to the date of the collapse of the stock market. And here we have it, finally. Just like I said earlier in this video that I knew that this date would eventually connect to the collapse of the stock market, and so it does with exactly 44 months to the predicted collapse of the stock market on May 8th. So does this. It connects with exactly 40 weeks to this Niagara Falls sign, which is a flood, Noah's flood symbolic sign. The day it froze, which is in itself symbolic, right? The stoppage of the flow, which hints at the flow and the flood waters, right? That burst forth from the dam, from the deep, right? So 9 months and 17 days, that's extremely relevant because Niagara Falls engenders a perennial rainbow, and it's described in Genesis 9:17. And that gets us to this Niagara Falls sign. And I already explained how this 17 months is relevant, exact 17 months is relevant between this Niagara Falls sign and the predicted date of the stock market collapse right here. Okay, so in other words, you can see the clear, direct connection. It's absolutely astounding. All right. Now, furthermore, I forgot to mention here, Dow, at this time, I don't know if it's still the case because this was now 3 years ago. But at the time, the CEO was a famous CEO. This was back, I guess relatively now, nearer anyway, the beginning of the woke movement in corporate America that has engendered a merger between leftist politics and the state and corporate power, the biggest fascist end of America, destruction of America movement of all of American history, this merger of corporate power and the state. And this was a sign of it. And I don't mean a prophetic sign, I mean just like an indicator of it. It was a prophetic sign also, but it was an indicator of what was coming. Because this famous CEO is or still is perhaps a homosexual CEO, and he's famous for it. And so he had the gay rights movement organization, NGO, GLAAD, I think is the name of it, be hired in their human resources department for their hiring and their employment. And in other words, and they flew the rainbow flag at the Dow headquarters. And so not only was Midland, Michigan flooded, but so was the headquarters. The headquarters was flooded, and they fly a rainbow flag at the headquarters because of the famous gay woke CEO that was implementing fascist, dictatorial, extreme leftist politics at the company. Okay? And homosexuality isn't just another sin, it's an abominable sin and a sign of the last stage of rebellion of a society against God before judgment destruction. If you look at cases in the Bible, the last stages of that society's rebellion against God included rampant homosexuality before God destroyed the society. And that's where we're at today. Okay, so this prophetic sign in Niagara Falls was exactly 110 weeks after this Niagara Falls sign which was the same day as the first day of the Maria fire that officially burned 9,999 acres. And you can look that up on Wikipedia. It lists it as being exactly 9,999 acres, and God pairs 9 and 110 together to confirm the signs and connections. And I think I'll play a short clip here explaining the relevance and why God pairs 9 and 110 together. It's amazing. Just a couple minutes clip, and then I'll be right back. Actually, I already played this clip earlier in this video, and so it's already been explained the reason why God pairs 9 and 110 together. Okay, so we have, and this also pairs with another 9 months to, well, never mind. That's another rabbit trail. Let's just keep it simple. Okay, so this date in turn connects with another exact 110 weeks. By the way, 110 weeks, 110 is prophetic because it's 9/11 symbolism, as I just explained, the 110 floors. But 110 weeks is especially prophetic, if you will, because it is 7 times 110 days. And Joshua died at the age of 110. And Joshua led the Hebrews around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, he led them while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. And so that's 7 times 110 days is 110 weeks. And so it's especially prophetic, if you will. And so we have this Noah's flood sign because, again, Niagara Falls is symbolic of the Noah's flood. And furthermore, the barge, this was the day that the barge moved for the first time. I didn't explain that yet. And this was a 9/11 sign in itself because this exceptional storm, a rare storm for this time of year, that was the remnant of a hurricane, it caused record flooding in eastern New York and western New England and killed 1 person, which established the prophetic significance of it with the 1 death. That's just how God's signs works. You'll have to take my word for it. And this was to point to the flight paths of the 2 flights from Boston, from New England to New York that slammed into the Twin Towers, the 110-story high Twin Towers. This was what made it a 9/11 sign, and this was the day that the barge moved because of that storm on October 31st, Halloween in 2019. It's called the Halloween storm, I think, at least in the media. It knocked out a lot of power in the area as well. And so that's more reason why this 110 weeks is relevant, connecting this Maria sign. Now, this Maria fire connects with 110 weeks. The 9,999 acres in the Maria fire connects with 110 weeks to this sign that involves Hurricane Maria, which was also a 9/11 sign, by the way, because it killed about 3,000 and about 3,000 souls perished on 9/11. It was 2,996. And in Exodus, it was about 3,000 souls that perished after their rebellion at Mount Sinai. Well, so anyway, Hurricane Maria, prior to this, just a couple of days, had caused damage to this dam. And on this date, there was an emergency evacuation in the middle of the night. They had to knock on doors because of the power outage. And it was in the middle of the night, and 70,000 people were evacuated from their homes that were threatened by this dam that was potentially going to burst and flood the area. And that was Noah's flood symbolism. And this was the night of the Revelation chapter 12 Revelation sign, which from Revelation chapter 12 depicts a birth. And Hurricane Maria in the news was said to have been dancing with Hurricane Joseph in the open Atlantic before it pummeled Puerto Rico. So Joseph and Maria, it was Hurricane Hosea, actually, sorry. Hurricane Hosea and Hurricane Maria hints at Mary and Joseph, and the dam bursting was symbolic of a woman's water breaking, and the Revelation 12 sign on this night was depicting a birth in the night sky. And so anyway, but also this is connecting to the predicted evacuation from Manhattan Island. And this was an evacuation in the middle of the night. And it's symbolic also of the rapture because The rapture is an evacuation. This was the Revelation 12 sign, which was the rapture sign. This was an evacuation in the middle of the night. And in Matthew 25, Jesus described a parable that spoke of the cry, the midnight cry at the midnight hour. And then the 5 of the 10 virgins or bridesmaids that were rescued and went into the wedding banquet while the other 5 were left behind. They all symbolize Christians. All Christians are sleeping and not watching the prophetic signs. Only the bride is. And anyway, those with the Holy Spirit, with the oil that Jesus spoke of, which is symbolic of the Holy Spirit, those that had the oil were allowed to enter and, in other words, be raptured with the midnight cry. And that's what all was symbolized with the threat of the dam and the evacuation. Okay? Now, a period of 42 months is described in this same Revelation chapter 12, and it regards the evacuation of the woman, and which then is attempted to be drowned with a river of water. Speaking of Revelation chapter 12, it connects with this Revelation chapter 12 sign right here. So exactly 42 months later, we have this prophetic sign, which is also symbolic of a river. It's the Suez Canal, and it was the cargo ship that got stuck. This was the day it got stuck. The day it broke free due to the moon tide, which in the Bible, rock is symbolism for Jesus, and the moon is a giant rock, and the moon symbolizes Christ in God's big picture of signs. The sun symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. Hence why in the Bible, watching for the timing of the moon is important, and is symbolism. Watching the timing of the moon in his signs is symbolic of watching the timing of the Lord's return through his prophetic signs, which include moon prophetic signs, including this one, which was the result of the moon tide that broke the Suez Canal ship free. And this was in Egypt, and it was, of course, analogous to Moses, which is a type for Jesus, that delivered the Hebrews from Egypt, just like Jesus will deliver in the rapture God's faithful followers. And that date is exactly 110 weeks to this May 8th date, the predicted collapse of the stock market. And again, the Suez Canal cargo ship sign is all about trade and commerce. It clogged the world's shipping trade artery, blocking $9 billion of trade per day. And $9 billion, of course, is 9 and the most important number that symbolizes God's judgment. But here we have another pairing of 9 and 110, with this 9 billion followed by 110 weeks exactly. All right, so have I explained this entire diagram? I think I have. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.